Testing, testing, testing. Testing, testing. Testing, testing. Now you.
That's it. The TV people are always the most important ones in the room. So. Good morning. The Committee on Homeland Security, Subcommittee on Counterterrorism and Intelligence will come to order. The subcommittee is meeting today in Central Islip, New York, to hear testimony on the threat posed by MS-13 and the efforts to counter this violent gang. I'd like to thank the ranking member, Ms. Kathleen Rice, for joining me in holding this important meeting. And now I will make an opening statement. Before that, let me thank all of you for being here today, all the witnesses, both in law enforcement, both family members, school superintendent, community advocates. It's really important, and also the fact that there's a turnout here of people from the community shows how vital this issue is. Bottom line is, MS-13 is a morally depraved, transnational murderous gang which terrorizes innocent people. The acts of violence connected to transnational gangs, specifically MS-13, have drastically and dramatically increased in Nassau and Suffolk County over the past several years. Just in the last little more than a year, there's been 17 murders in Suffolk County alone committed by MS-13. And this is something which cannot be allowed to continue. It's essential we have a full-scale national, state, and local effort to destroy and end the terrorism, the tyranny of MS-13. They, in many ways, have turned immigrant communities into a killing field. And it's primarily within the immigrant community that these vicious machete killings, brutal murders are being carried out. And these are good people who are often unheard or not listened to. And so it's important, I think, that we bring this to the public's attention to realize that maybe in Central Islip and Brentwood today, the fact is these are innocent human beings being killed. It's happening on our watch, and we have to do all we can to stop it. And I want to thank all those who are here today because they have made significant contributions in this war against MS-13. It's important that everybody stand together in this. I've spoken to President Trump, who is absolutely committed to doing whatever is necessary to devastate MS-13. As you know, Attorney General Sessions was in here on April 28th, actually in this courthouse, meeting with many of the people who are here today to express the full support of the Justice Department and all the resources of the federal government. I know that here in Suffolk County, the FBI, Homeland Security's HSI, and Nassau County Police, Suffolk County Police, Sheriff DeMarco, everyone has been working together, and that is really important. And there's been really very positive results over the last several months. We see these sweeps and raids where 20, 30, 40 have been arrested, and these are MS-13 members. These are people who are affiliated with MS-13. These are people who are terrorizing the community. And so it's essential that the word get out that it's important that there be cooperation with law enforcement, because bottom line is that the police and the FBI and Homeland Security can only do so much. The real information is going to come from people on the ground. And that's why it's vital that we establish that trust, that relationship, and that people in the community, leaders in the community, encourage the people in the community to cooperate. And because I remember being at a community meeting back in April with Commissioner Sweeney, and he said that he knew that the people in the room knew who the murderers were. So it's important that those people come forward, whether it's this case or other cases, because certainly the murder of those 4 young boys back in April was probably, that attracted national and international attention. And considering the fact that Suffolk County and Nassau County have such low crime rates, it's really terrible that we become known for MS-13. So I'm not talking about this from an ego point or from a prestige point of view about we want Nassau and Suffolk County to be known for the fact that they do have solid law enforcement and the crime rate is low. We don't want it to be attracting other gang members, other gangs to come to Long Island. We want them to know that so long as they're here, they're going to be on the run, they're going to be hunted down, and they're going to be arrested and deported, whatever has to be done to stop them. So again, I look forward to the hearing. I look forward to the witnesses. All of them are experts. And with that, I yield to the ranking member, Ms. Rice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing, and thank you to all of our witnesses for coming today. We are fortunate to have 2 diverse panels of witnesses with unique perspectives and insights on how we can both combat both combat gang violence on Long Island on the one hand, and on the other, empower young people with the knowledge, support, and resources they need to reject gangs in their communities. We're here today to examine a very real and serious threat to public safety on Long Island. MS-13 and their rival gangs are criminal organizations who commit brutal acts of violence and have taken too many lives to name in the few minutes I have for this statement. They are organizations that revel in violence, crave fear, and terrorize the communities in which they live and operate and recruit their members. Many of the members of MS-13 are in fact immigrants and children and descendants of immigrants, and over the past few months it has seemed to me that President Trump and Attorney General Sessions have sought to use the threat of MS-13 to justify their push to build a wall on the southern border and round up and deport millions of immigrants, including those whose only crime is being in this country without paperwork. This is not the time nor the place to debate those policies, but I bring it up only to say that what too often gets lost in this highly charged and divisive debate is the fact that many, if not most, of MS-13's victims are also immigrants, the families who fear that their son might be targeted by, or pressured to join MS-13 are immigrant families. The communities that are terrorized by MS-13 are often immigrant communities, and I think it is safe to say that immigrants want these gangs to be dismantled and brought to justice as much as anyone else, if not more. As the former Nassau County District Attorney, I've seen firsthand how vicious and unrepentant these gangs are. I've seen MS-13 members laugh at the judge as they were sentenced to life in prison or deportation. I believe all violent criminals should be punished to the full extent of the law. I believe that violent criminals who are in this country illegally should be deported and prevented from ever coming back. I believe that dismantling violent criminal organizations like MS-13 must be a priority for law enforcement officials and lawmakers at all levels. I also know for a fact that the vast majority of immigrants in this country are not criminals. They are, in fact, more likely to be the victims of crime than the perpetrators. And I know that you cannot take on a gang like MS-13 without the help of immigrant communities. You need members of the community to talk to you, provide information, report crimes, and for that, they need to trust you. They need to know that stepping forward to help will not lead to them being detained and deported and ripped away from their families. I have met with many immigrants in my district over the past 6 months, documented and undocumented, and there is a very real and palpable sense of fear right now in Long Island's immigrant communities. I'm concerned that this sense of fear and alienation, first of all, may make immigrants, particularly young immigrants, more vulnerable to be targeted by MS-13 for protection and recruitment purposes, and second, could make immigrants less likely to cooperate with authorities, both of which would significantly undermine our efforts to eliminate gangs like MS-13 from our communities. I would appreciate any thoughts or insight our witnesses can provide about those concerns. I would like to thank all of our law enforcement witnesses on the first panel and congratulate you for the successful operation last week that resulted in the arrest of 39 MS-13 members and affiliates, as well as 6 members of other street gangs. Finally, I want to offer my condolences to Ms. Rodriguez and Mr. Mickens, and thank you for having the courage to testify today. And I want to thank all the witnesses on our second panel for the critical work that you do, whether helping prevent young people from joining gangs like MS-13 or being a voice for our immigrant communities. I know your work as parents, activists, and educators may seem to go unnoticed at times, but I assure you we are aware and truly grateful for your efforts. I look forward to a frank and productive conversation today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Rice. We're pleased to have 2 panels of distinguished witnesses before us today on this important topic. All the witnesses are reminded that their written testimony will be submitted for the record. To the extent you can, we ask you to try to limit your opening statement to 5 minutes. We're not going to enforce it strictly, but to the extent you can, it will be appreciated. It will give us more of an opportunity to have a give and take in the question and answer session. So our first witness is Mr. William F. Sweeney, Jr., the Assistant Director in charge of the New York Field Office of the FBI. He's been with the FBI since 1998. He has extensive record on both criminal and national security investigations, and he came to New York as the special agent in charge and assistant director in charge, rather, of the field office in October of 2016, which I believe was the same week of the Chelsea bombing. So it was really a baptism by fire, but he does an outstanding job, extremely cooperative, I know, with my office and with the Congress generally. So with that, Mr. Sweeney, I thank you for being here today, and you're recognized.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, Representative King, Ranking Member Rice. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss gang violence on Long Island and our efforts to combat the threat posed by MS-13. The FBI assesses there's been a surge in MS-13 activity and recruitment in the United States over the past 2 years. And while MS-13 is not the largest street gang in the United States, they're increasingly the most violent and well-organized. In terms of organization, origin, and structure, and in comparison to other gangs, MS-13 is atypical in their approach to crime and structure. Clique leaders in the United States coordinate with one another, as well as the leadership in El Salvador. This isn't something we normally see with other groups. Members capitalize on the ability to extort individuals living in the U.S. who still have family in Central America, threatening to harm them. Using fear as a method of extortion, the gang often targets small business owners, individuals who don't want to join the gang, and gang members who no longer want to be a part of MS-13. MS-13 has gained notoriety for the brutal nature of their crimes, and their motivation is generally rooted in a desire to kill for the sake of killing. Going back to January of 1992, the FBI announced the Safe Streets Violent Crime Initiative, designed to allow each field office in the FBI to address violent street gangs, drug-related violence through the establishment of FBI-sponsored long-term proactive task forces. The Violent Gang Safe Streets Task Force became the vehicle through which all federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies joined together to address violent crime plaguing their communities. The FBI Safe Streets Gang Unit administers 169 of these task forces nationwide, staffed by approximately 800 agents, roughly 1,375 state and local law enforcement personnel, and 58 agents from federal agencies. The Safe Streets Task Force concept expands cooperation and communication among federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies, increasing productivity and avoiding duplication of investigative effort. Here in New York, your task force is called the Long Island Gang Task Force and is part of that Safe Streets network. Since 2003, this task force has been protecting the communities on Long Island from the threat of gang violence. The leadership of that task force, some of which sits at the table with me and some behind me, is currently composed of agents and officers from the FBI, the Suffolk County Police Department, the Nassau County Police Department, the Nassau County Sheriff's Department, the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department, Suffolk County Probation, Rockville Center Police, New York State Police, Hempstead Police, and the Bureau of ATF. This model allows us to bring all essential stakeholders together to address the most violent crimes in the community. Since 2010, your task force has arrested over 200 MS-13 members, resulting in the successful prosecution of members involved in more than 35 homicides. A majority of these members have been convicted on federal racketeering charges for participating in murders, attempted murders, and assaults. We will continue to surge resources to work this threat. We've increased our participation on our task force by adding personnel from the New York State Police, and we've enhanced our intelligence capabilities by developing an intelligence fusion group where all the analysts sit together from these agencies. We've also enhanced our relationship with the Suffolk County Police Department to include our mutual agreement that all MS-13 homicide investigations in Suffolk County will be investigated jointly by the task force and the Suffolk Homicide Squad. The FBI also works closely with our transnational anti-gang task force based in El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. These groups, called TAGs, were set up by FBI agents who lead vetted teams of national police and prosecutors, coordinating with the legal attachés in those countries and coordinating back here at home. Through these TAGs, we reap the benefits of local intelligence, which allows us to apply a national and international approach to the problem. We're currently focused on identifying MS-13 leadership in the United States. We're working to establish an international standard for understanding the elements of the gang structure, its members, and associates. Using overseas resources to identify and target individuals and organizations that negatively affect our local field offices here and our local communities has proven successful. In fact, the partnership led to the capture of top 10 fugitives, I believe, back in 2013 and 2014. MS-13 remains a top priority for the FBI as we assess they will continue to expand and employ intimidation tactics while engaging in increasingly violent crimes. The relationships we've established with the partners, both at home and abroad, will continue to prove essential in identifying, combating and eliminating the threats posed by MS-13. Chairman King and Ranking Member Rice, thank you again for the opportunity to discuss the MS-13 threat. Mr. Chairman, we're grateful for the leadership you and the committee have provided to the FBI, and we thank you for your continued support, and I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. That was FBI efficiency, right on the button, 5 minutes. Thank you. Thank you very much for your testimony. Our next witness is Angel Melendez, who is Special Agent in charge of the New York Field Office for Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, Homeland Security Investigations, HSI. Mr. Melendez began his career in 1996 as a Special Agent for U.S. Customs Services in San Juan, Puerto Rico. He has served in a number of leadership positions, including Special Agent in charge of the San Juan, Puerto Rico HSI Office. In July of 2016, he was named as the Special Agent in charge of the New York HSI Office. And Mr. Melendez, again, I want to thank you for cooperating with my office for the briefings you've given me. And with that, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, and good morning, Chairman King, Ranking Member Rice, and members of the Long Island community. As Special Agent in charge for ICE's Homeland Security Investigations in New York, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss our efforts to investigate, disrupt, and dismantle violent gang activity across the United States. My oral testimony today will focus on HSI's efforts in combating transnational gang violence by the Mara Salvatrucha, or MS-13, on Long Island. Through violent crime, MS-13 terrorizes our communities. In the last year alone, Long Island has witnessed 11 murders attributed to MS-13. The gruesome quadruple homicide of 4 Long Island teenagers at the hands of MS-13 just this April shocked our nation. HSI does not take this lightly now, nor have we in the past. In 2005, to combat transnational gangs, we initiated Operation Community Shield. HSI has developed a multifaceted approach to attacking violent crime alongside our domestic and foreign law enforcement partners. To date, this program has led to the arrest of over 7,000 MS-13 affiliates across the nation. HSI's ever-evolving strategy to investigate and disrupt MS-13, particularly its pipeline, is informed by how the gang operates. Let me touch on 3 critical points. First, MS-13 exploits illicit pathways in Central America to further its mission to rape, control, and kill. HSI, through its unique border authorities and international footprint, is targeting these illicit pathways. In New York, we established an extraterritorial criminal travel strike force, which, in partnership with DOJ, investigates foreign-based human smuggling networks. Second, MS-13 is increasing its membership through recruitment. Within the last few years, more than 5,000 unaccompanied alien children from the Northern Triangle countries have resettled in Long Island. Once here, MS-13 can prey upon the vulnerability of these and other children who may lack family and community ties. In fact, schools have become ground zero for MS-13 recruitment. Children may face retribution from the gang for refusing to join and become part of its ranks. Rapidly, they transform into the lethal MS-13 gang members that they once feared. Third, MS-13 cannot survive without money. Investigations have revealed that MS-13 maintains a sophisticated financial network that supports its nefarious activities. As we have learned, MS-13 generates illicit income through extortion, prostitution, the collection of membership dues, and illicit trafficking. HSI was instrumental in having MS-13 designated as a transnational criminal organization by the Department of Treasury in 2012. This designation is an additional tool that allows us to effectively attack MS-13's financial infrastructure. In addition to focusing on the MS-13 pipeline, HSI targets members for criminal prosecution and removal. Since October 2014 to present, HSI, along with its partners, have made 842 criminal and 273 administrative arrests of MS-13 gang affiliates across the country. In the same time frame, HSI New York, along with its partners, have made 109 criminal and 55 administrative arrests of MS-13 gang affiliates in Long Island alone. With the invaluable partnership of the police departments and sheriff departments of Suffolk and Nassau counties, HSI has kept its proverbial finger on the pulse of the MS-13 activity across Long Island. In response to the recent uptick in violence executed by the MS-13s across Long Island, HSI New York, partnering with ICE's enforcement and removal operations, initiated Operation Matador. It brings together our DHS and law enforcement partners in a unified approach to combating MS-13's growth. It integrates our key homeland security capabilities: enforcement, interdiction, intelligence, border security, removal, and ultimately public safety. In the last 5 weeks since launching Matador, this initiative yielded 45 arrests of known or suspected MS-13 affiliates. Although we have made strides in attacking the MS-13 problem, we have limited resources and must continue to be proactive as we forge ahead with this critical mission. Committed to working alongside our law enforcement partners, HSI continues to disrupt MS-13 through enforcement of criminal and civil immigration statutes, as well as active gang investigations in Long Island, throughout the United States, and throughout the globe. Chairman King, Ranking Member Rice, I thank you again for the opportunity to appear before you today and for your continued support. I would be pleased to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Melendez. Thank you very much. Our next witness is Suffolk County Police Commissioner Timothy Sini. Commissioner Sini was appointed as Commissioner of the Suffolk County Police Department in January of 2016. He serves as a representative on the White House's Office of Drug Control Policy for the New York, New Jersey region on the HIDTA team. He's also the Executive Director of the Suffolk County Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. He previously served as the Assistant Deputy County Executive for Public Safety, and he began his career in the United States Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York. And I have to say that I worked very closely with Commissioner Sini on this over the last several months, this whole MS-13 issue, and he has provided me with some very invaluable intelligence information. So with that, Commissioner Sini, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member Rice. I want to thank the committee for the opportunity to appear before it today. Chairman, I want to thank you for your attention to this issue and your general support of law enforcement. It's very much appreciated. Ranking Member Rice, it's very reassuring to have an effective prosecutor in Congress to be looking at this issue. So I thank you for the opportunity. I'm going to keep my opening remarks quite brief. I've submitted detailed testimony. I also testified before the United States Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Operations. And I thought what I would do is detail the strategy that we're employing here in Suffolk County and the region, talk about some of the ways in which the federal government can further assist the local municipalities who are addressing this issue in the trenches, talk about some of the strategies that I talked about before the Senate, and give an update as to where we are since the Senate testimony. But essentially the name of the game, and everyone at this table will tell you, is gathering intelligence and identifying known MS-13 gang members. It's important to be targeting these gang members relentlessly, and without the intelligence, we can't do that. So collecting intelligence is the first step. And then creating priorities and strategic subject lists and targeting known MS-13 gang members relentlessly. In Suffolk County, we utilize our gang officers stationed in our precinct, as well as members of our firearm suppression team and other police officers, to do street enforcement targeting these particular MS-13 gang members. And that does a lot of different things at once. It suppresses crime, which is why you've seen such a dramatic reduction in crime in affected areas, Brentwood, Central Islip, and other areas. But it also collects intelligence and generates evidence that can be used later on in larger cases that can effectively dismantle this gang. All the while we're doing that street enforcement, and I should take a step back and say that in connection with that street enforcement, the Suffolk County Police Department has made over 220 MS-13 arrests since September of 2016. Since Nisa and Kayla were murdered, we've arrested over 220 MS-13, we've made over 220 MS-13 arrests of approximately 160 individual MS-13 gang members. So that targeting has been occurring at record clips. All the while, we're working with our federal law enforcement partners, particularly the FBI through the Safe Streets Task Force, to work RICO cases, to build RICO cases. And RICO is a very effective federal statute that allows us to dismantle gangs such as MS-13. It carries stiff penalties. It acts as an umbrella where we can bring in large number of MS-13 gang members to prosecute, and it's a great way to go after the leadership as well. Of course, since September of 2016, in conjunction with the FBI Safe Streets Task Force and the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of New York, we brought a 13-defendant indictment, which included the murderers of Nisa and Kayla, as well as Jose Pena Hernandez. So RICO is a very effective tool. In addition, we are working with the Department of Homeland Security to make sure that we are targeting individuals, active MS-13 gang members, for detention and removal when appropriate. Oftentimes, we are in the position to arrest and criminally prosecute individuals, and that is the best case scenario, to bring cases against these individuals, hold them accountable, take them off our streets. But sometimes law enforcement is not in a position to make a criminal arrest for a variety of different reasons. And the Department of Homeland Security is in a position to use its immigration tools, its civil tools, to take these active MS-13 gang members off the streets and take dangerous individuals off the streets and commence removal proceedings against them. So it's another tool that we are using here in Suffolk County. We are of course, enhancing our police presence in affected areas as well. And we are utilizing intelligence to increase our police presence in affected areas, and we're partnered recently with the New York State Police to dramatically increase our presence, and I think that is being recognized by the communities and also contributing to the decrease in crime. And law enforcement will continue those strategies and continue to fine-tune those strategies, and we'll weed out the dangerous gang members from our streets. But it's important, too, that we work on the other side. We work on the gang prevention and intervention side, because if we're weeding out dangerous gang members from our communities, but MS-13 is increasingly recruiting, we're not going to solve this problem. So we have to fight it on both ends. We are moving forward with several different gang prevention programs in our communities, but more needs to be done on that front. When I testified before the Senate, I asked very specifically, I discussed very specific proposals that I thought would help in our fight, and those are the following. More AUSAs right here in this building. This office does not have sufficient AUSAs to prosecute the number of cases that we need to do. So I would again reiterate my request for additional federal assets in the form of additional AUSAs for the Long Island Criminal Division. Improved intelligence sharing. Well, since I last testified, I am pleased to say that both the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security are launching intelligence centers specifically relating to MS-13. And in addition, I've been asked to join a team that's being organized by the Department of State to work with foreign nations, including El Salvador, to establish a fusion center outside the country. So I think we're making tremendous headway on that front. Third, additional federal funding to offset patrolling costs. The Suffolk County Police Department has a grant in the queue right now for $500,000 that would help us offset patrolling costs that target affected areas that are affected by MS-13. So I would reiterate that request. Additional federal funding for gang prevention programs. I would reiterate that request. And a hard look at the implications of the UAC program. You know, these are some of our most vulnerable children in our communities, folks who are coming here unaccompanied, first time in the United States, being placed in our communities, and there's very little federal oversight or resources connected to that program. And again, I'm happy to see that the Congressman introduced H.R. 2459 to take a hard look at that program and figure out ways to decrease the vulnerability of those individuals to gang recruitment. And I do indeed look forward to answering any questions by the committee. And again, I want to thank the committee for its attention to this very important issue.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Thank you for your efforts. Our next witness is Suffolk County Sheriff Vincent DeMarco. Sheriff DeMarco began his career as a Suffolk County Deputy Sheriff in 1994. He was elected in November 2005 to his current position, and he was reelected in 9 and
13.
and 13. And so it's 12 years as sheriff. He's done an outstanding job. I know you're not running for re-election this year, but I want to congratulate you on the outstanding job you've done and wish you well. With that, you're recognized.
Well, I want to thank Congressman King and Congresswoman Rice and all of the committee members for conducting this hearing on Long Island to bring attention to the threat that criminal street gangs pose to the safety and security of our communities and the nation. I would also like to thank President Trump for making the eradication of gangs a priority of his administration. Since time is limited, I'll focus on my remarks specifically on what I think needs to be done now to prevent criminal gang networks like MS-13 from exploiting weaknesses in our government programs. These are complex issues to tackle, but solutions that fail to address the multitude of ways that gangs have infiltrated society are destined to fail. We must take a system-wide approach if we are to be successful in eradicating criminal gang networks, just as the United States has taken the lead in the world in the fight against terrorism. Criminal gangs are very similar to terrorist organizations, and they capitalize on similar vulnerabilities in their recruitment of members, poverty, poor socialization, a lack of opportunities for gainful employment, and close ties to other gang members. Communities like Brentwood, New York, are targets for gang recruitment because there is a high concentration of new immigrants, including many unaccompanied minors who tend to be more easily coerced into street gangs. The Sheriff's Office Gang Intelligence Unit at the Suffolk County Correctional Facility has interviewed hundreds of youth from Brentwood and its surrounding communities. These interviews provide significant insight to the underlying causes of gang proliferation, such as dangerous gaps in our nation's border security, loopholes in our immigration system, a lack of communication with local stakeholders, and the way that these gangs have exploited government programs like the Unaccompanied Refugee Minors Program run by the Office of Refugee Resettlement. One inmate, an MS-13 member, described his trek from Central America to the United States at age 9. His father, who is also affiliated with MS-13 in El Salvador, made the arrangements with the El Cartel del Golfo, which is the Gulf Cartel, to transport him across the Texas border with Mexico. The cartel is well known for trafficking drugs and weapons into the United States. With the help of the cartel, this adolescent bypassed immigration authorities at the border and eventually made his way to Brentwood, New York, with several other family members. Another young male, age 17, is an MS-13 member from Honduras. He was 15 years old when he left his native country to travel to Mexico by train. He reports that it took 3 months to get to Mexico because he had to make stops along the way to beg for food and water. Once in Mexico, he and other adolescents were rounded up by the Mexican mafia at gunpoint. They were told that they would have to transport marijuana for the mafia or they would be killed. He was fitted with 48 pounds of marijuana, and then 2 guides escorted them from Sonora, Mexico to Phoenix, Arizona. After crossing the border, he was taken into custody by United States immigration officials and placed in a facility for unaccompanied minors. He stated he remained there for 4 months and flew to New York to stay with his uncle. Both were subsequently charged with violent felonies. I've included in my submission 10 notes from interviews like this, just to give you a sense. These are their words about how they were brought to this country and how the unaccompanied minor program works in reality. Gang members like these youths are being arrested and prosecuted in record numbers, but it's clear that law enforcement cannot solve this problem alone. According to a report released by the Department of Health and Human Services, ORR placed 930 unaccompanied minors in Suffolk County over a 6-month period from October 2016 to April of 2017. Since federal authorities do not communicate with local human service agencies, law enforcement, nor do they notify school districts when youth are placed with sponsors in the county, there is no way to responsibly deal with the influx of minors coming into places like Brentwood. This must change. Unaccompanied minors are particularly vulnerable to gang involvement, especially those who have witnessed violence at a young age and experienced significant trauma. Without appropriate interventions, some of these children are destined to engage in criminal gangs such as MS-13. Furthermore, federal authorities must close loopholes in the ORR program which threaten national security and aid in the proliferation of criminal gangs in the United States. Anyone who sponsors a child to resettle in the United States should be held fully accountable for compliance with all immigration court hearings. It has been reported that sponsor families are not always thoroughly vetted and that youth are placed in the care of adults who do not meet legal residency requirements. Some youth are placed in families with siblings and relatives who are gang involved, and they are concentrated in towns with high rates of gang activity. This accelerates the cycle of crime and incarceration in many lower-income communities and hurts law-abiding residents who are struggling in their own quest for security and personal prosperity. Our nation's porous southern border has become a gateway for MS-13 to thrive on Long Island and neighborhoods across America. This is also the economic epicenter for drug and sex traffickers, as well as a common route for weapons to enter the country illegally. Mexican cartels and organized criminal gangs have formed a powerful economic alliance to smuggle heroin and other illicit drugs into the United States. 90% of the heroin that enters this country comes through Mexico, so we must intensify security along the southern border. There are real serious problems. These are real serious problems that have been ignored for far too long. Finally, if we are truly serious about shutting down the MS-13 pipeline, we must improve human services and education in low-income communities. Federal lawmakers should strongly consider more funding for the Gang Resistance Education and Training Program, known as GREAT, which the Sheriff's Office runs in schools throughout Suffolk County, including some in Brentwood and surrounding communities. Young people also need more recreational and social outlets, as well as viable opportunities for employment to help them better assimilate into mainstream society so they can resist the lure of gang membership. I want to thank you again for the opportunity to speak here today, and I look forward to any questions.
Thank you, Sheriff. Our next witnesses are from Nassau County, Commissioner Crumpter and Sergeant Mike Marino. Commissioner Crumpter has been acting Commissioner of Nassau County since February of 2014. He's going to be retiring in I guess the next several weeks. Tom, I want to thank you for your years of service and the outstanding job you've done. Sergeant Mike Marino and I have been friends for many years. We've have serious fights about baseball, but other than that, we agree on every other issue. And it's great to see Mike here. He's done an outstanding job heading up the gang unit in Nassau County. So Commissioner Crumpton and Sergeant Marino, you can divide up your time. And again, thank you for being here today.
I'm going to be brief in my comments. Sergeant Marino will dive into the details of the current status of MS-13. Good morning, Chairman King, Ranking Member Rice. Thank you for conducting this hearing. This is clearly a significant issue with dire consequences. Long Island is frequently cited as being among the safest large suburban communities in America. But unfortunately, we have gangs that are terrorizing communities within Nassau and Suffolk County. Unfortunately, of late, Long Island has been the focus of national stories about violent atrocities committed by MS-13, rather than the safe communities that are really a benchmark. Of late, the most violent gang in Nassau County, and among the most violent gangs probably anywhere, is MS-13. MS-13 uses threats, intimidation, and violence in order to control and recruit members and carry out their criminal enterprise. Currently in Nassau County, we've identified 712 members of MS-13, of which 345 are currently active members. After 2 years of investigation by the Nassau County Police Department, Nassau County District Attorney, New York State Park Police, and Homeland Security, 41 members of MS-13 were indicted last week on conspiracy counts, with a number of underlying charges consisting of attempted murder. Of particular note in this investigation, and perhaps most troubling, is 19 of the 41 subjects indicted were unaccompanied minors. I think it is important to remember that not all unaccompanied minors are gang members, but we are seeing a significant number of gang members are unaccompanied minors. What is most important, and the biggest challenge, and Congresswoman Rice touched on this, is the trust within the community. And because of the very way we police in Nassau County, this case in particular, without the support of the community as witnesses, we would not have been able to make the case. The community came out in force and basically made it very clear they will not tolerate this terrorist acts by these MS-13 gang members. Nassau County Police will not tolerate violent street gangs. As has been stated multiple times by law enforcement over the last several months, we're at a war with these violent street gangs. A few words about the Nassau County Police Department strategy on dealing with gangs. We take a holistic approach. At the very core of that is the community outreach that we engage each and every day. We look to build trust with the communities because we recognize that without the trust of the community, without partnering with the community, it'll be all the more difficult to address these gangs. We use a multi-tier approach for gang enforcement. We use suppression by plainclothes units. The Gang Investigation Squad, headed by Detective Sergeant Marino, focuses on all gang investigations for all crimes and focus specifically on gang impact cases. We have a significant youth outreach program in Nassau County, among the largest police athletic leagues in the country with over 40,000 participants. This is important because it gives other outlets and other activities for the kids rather than becoming involved with the gangs as opposed to surrogate families. We try to give them alternatives. Additionally, we run police youth academies on a regular basis, which targets at-risk youth, and the Police Explorer program. As we move forward, I hope as a result of this hearing, the federal government will dedicate additional human resources, specifically, as Commissioner Cini pointed out, additional prosecutors in the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Eastern District in Islip, as well as additional federal agents. More cases, more people, more cases. That's the way it works. While the focus of today's hearing is on MS-13, it's important to realize that the focus must be on violent street gangs. What we have learned in Nassau County is that when you eradicate a street gang in a community, a vacuum is created, and a new gang will emerge. So it would be nearsighted to focus solely on MS-13 as we move forward. As we move forward, there are a number of programs and laws that will greatly assist law enforcement. The most significant issue that law enforcement faces going forward is going dark. The most high-profile case in recent memory is the San Bernardino terrorist attack, where Apple Computer outright refused a federal court order to provide assistance in gaining access to a phone. This problem will become more and more problematic as we move forward, and it will make it more difficult to engage in those enterprise corruption investigations. Clearly, MS-13 is an enterprise corruption case. We have dedicated significant resources in the war on street gangs and will continue to do so. Probably the most problematic is the case of unaccompanied minors. Unaccompanied minors are an issue not because of anything they've done. What happens is there is no due diligence done as a result of the unaccompanied minors coming into this country. If a program is going to succeed with unaccompanied minors, it's going to have to involve due diligence and programs so they're set up to succeed, not left. So they end up turning to gangs as a surrogate family. Thank you. Sergeant Marino.
Sergeant Marino.
Good morning, Chairman King, Ranking Member Rice. I am honored and grateful to represent the Nassau County Police Department in providing testimony on the activities of MS-13 within the County of Nassau and sitting among the top law enforcement officials in the nation. While Nassau County is one of the safest places in the country and we're experiencing record low crime rates, we are not spared the violence of MS-13. There have been 12 MS-13 investigations so far this year, which is the lowest since our inception of the unit in 2005. The national media attention and gruesome nature of their crimes has magnified the perception of their activities amongst the public. We cannot ignore the rival gangs in the county, such as 18th Street, Vatos Locos, Salvadorians with Pride, Latin Pride, and the Bloods, as when one gang is diminished, the other fills the void. MS-13 assaults outnumber all other MS crime combined. MS-13 crimes in the county are predominantly gang versus gang or gang within gang. Innocent victims can occur due to misidentification as adversaries due to style of dress, associations, or social media posts or disrespect. These events are often retaliatory from incidents that may have happened a day ago, a month ago, or several years ago. GIS utilizes many strategies, initiatives, and law enforcement techniques to solve gang incidents. The men and women that make up the GIS are senior expert gang detectives. They have long relationships to the communities and go to great lengths to protect witnesses and victims. We investigate gang-motivated based crime and gang membership-based crime in order to increase the accuracy of our statistics and lessen missed investigative opportunities. Our School Administrators Gang Awareness Program, SAGA, partners the schools with the police department to foster information sharing and provide training. This relationship has resulted in many non-criminal interventions of gang members or potential gang members as the first signs of gang affiliation often occur in the schools. When you look at the education levels of gang members, it is staggeringly low. We encourage the schools to out-recruit the gangs in what we deem gang replacement therapy, joining the track team, marching band, or any other after-school activity. On the enforcement side, we focus on our top shooter initiative. We believe there are smaller subsets of those gang members that are willing to actually fire a gun at another and kill another human being. When we arrest a shooter, we also remove a target from the rival gangs, so it gives us a multiplier effect on reducing shooting incidents. We expand that concept to machetes for MS-13 as well. It's important that we assess retaliatory actions when these attacks occur. Our recent Operation 503, named for the country calling code of El Salvador, was a joint investigation by the Song Bureau of the Nassau County District Attorney's Office, the Hempstead PD's new gang unit, New York State Park Police, and HSI, resulting in the conspiracy indictment of 41 MS-13 gang members, 19 of which were UACs and 1 U.S. citizen. Social media now is being used by gangs to recruit, threaten, and intimidate. Law enforcement can use this material as powerful evidence. Back in 2013, when Representative Rice was district attorney, we were attempting to attain a Title III wiretap with the FBI, but could not quite reach our legal threshold until we discovered 2 YouTube videos, Puppies on Deck and In the Trap, which she probably still remembers the lyrics to. That operation seized down started then and eradicated the Roland 60s Crips from Roosevelt and is now being prosecuted by the Eastern District U.S. Attorney, which can serve as a model for MS also. Coincidentally, last Thursday, the GIS conducted Operation 503, and simultaneously, the Eastern District convicted and sentenced a high-ranking Roland 60s Crip from Operation Seized Down to over 100 years in prison. I think almost all our law enforcement partners, both federal and local, were involved between those 2 cases. That was a very bad day for gangs and a very good day for law enforcement and the residents of Nassau County. I want to thank Commissioner Crumpter, Deputy Commissioner Ryder for allowing me to represent the Nassau County Police Department, and I want to thank the men and women of the Gang Enforcement Squad in Nassau County for their hard and dangerous work every day. I thank the committee members and Congresswoman Rice and Congressman King for inviting me to appear today. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergeant Marino, and I know you have at least one of your members in the back there from the gang unit. Still, yeah. Commissioner Sini and Commissioner Crumpter, I know that, for instance, the 12 individuals who were indicted and charged back in March for the killings, conspiracies, narcotics tracking, and 19 of the 41 who were arrested last week were unaccompanied minors. And I also know that in the last year alone, there were 2,700 unaccompanied minors placed into Long Island. I think in Suffolk County in the last 3 years, it's been almost 5,000. Commissioner Sini, you and I have discussed, I think you've said publicly, to an extent, MS-13 has been able to game the unaccompanied minors system in that often we have they're placed with families who could be supportive of MS-13 or maybe threaten to support MS-13, and those kids, in effect, are placed up here. And again, this is a small minority of the overall, so I'm not trying to have a broad brush attack on the unaccompanied minors. The fact is, there seems to be a lack of vetting in the program as to what families are sponsoring them, which children are going to those families, and what is the subsequent monitoring of those unaccompanied minors within those families and within the school districts. So I'd like to basically ask Commissioner Sini, Commissioner Crumpter, and again, FBI and HSI, if you want to comment on that, as to what the situation is and what can be done to improve the vetting so we won't have that situation where, again, such a large percentage of those who have been arrested are actually unaccompanied minors, which means that young people have only come here within the last 2 or 3 years.
So in Suffolk County, since 2014, approximately between 4,500 and 5,000 UACs have been placed in Suffolk County. The vast majority of those UACs have been placed in Brentwood and Central Islip, but certainly numerous communities have received UACs. Congressman, Chairman, as you mentioned, of that amount, a very, very small fraction have become involved with MS-13 to our knowledge. Nonetheless, it remains certainly a recruitment tool that MS-13 has used, and it's for obvious reasons. These children, they're young, they're unaccompanied, they're not here with their parents, they're new to the country, they're seeking a sense of cultural unity, they're scared, they're experiencing trauma, both in terms of what they experienced in their home country and their journey here to the United States, and their placement, the process of being placed in a community. And that makes them prime time for gang recruitment. So intelligence has indicated everything that you've mentioned, that there hasn't been proper screening of sponsors in certain instances. There certainly has been a lack of sponsor compliance post-placement. There's no notification. I think Sheriff DeMarco mentioned this. There's no local notification, whether it's to a human service organization like Department of Social Services, to the police department, to the school districts. There's no local notification of placement, and there's very little funding connected to the program. And I believe that I've only been able to identify one service provider in Suffolk County that's receiving monies directly connected to UACs through the Office of Refugee Resettlement, and that's Catholic Charities. Certainly these children are being serviced in other capacities, but connected specifically to the program, I've only identified that one program. So what law enforcement is asking for is simply Congress to take a look at the program to make sure that it's being implemented in a responsible way. We understand that this is a humanitarian program and that these children need to be placed. This all grew from a settlement agreement back in the 80s or 90s. Then the whole program was codified in Title VIII, and we have a legal and moral obligation to place these children in our communities. But we need to do so responsibly. We need to make sure that the children are vetted. We need to make sure that the sponsors are vetted. We have to make sure that there's sponsor compliance post-placement, essentially making sure the sponsors are doing the right thing by these children. And we need to make sure that there's funding connected to placement of children in our communities. It's not fair to Suffolk County to take in 4,500 UACs, some of the most vulnerable individuals, very vulnerable individuals, without any federal funding. So the message from law enforcement, I think, is if we don't provide that support to these children, MS-13 will, or another gang will. And we need to make sure that this program is implemented in a responsible way.
Since Congresswoman Rice and I are the only two here today, we'll on this allow each of you to answer this question to the extent you want, and then Ms. Rice will then have her question. So don't worry about the time as far as answering this question. I would just respond on that also, as I know Congressman Israel and I, after I visited the Central Islip School District several years ago, and realized that these children are put into these schools and there's no money following them. And so I know Steve Israel and I introduced legislation to have the federal government have money follow the unaccompanied minors. It went nowhere. This is looked upon as a regional issue, and the rest of the country, quite frankly, it was not interested. The administration wasn't. I don't think this administration will be either, to be honest with you. So, but it's something we have to work on. We really
I'm familiar with the bill, H.R. 2634, and I thank you and the congressman for introducing that bill. What the country needs to realize is that this is a problem that's going to affect their community at one point.
And so hopefully a hearing like this will have that type of impact. Commissioner Crumpter, have you or Sergeant Marino, either one?
I believe it's at the very core of this. I think you can draw parallels to the foster program. You know, in the foster program, when a child's taken into custody of the state, they do due diligence. Not only do they do diligence on the home, but then they follow up with regular visits. And as far as I understand, these unaccompanied minors are only being vetted on where they're coming from and why they ended up here. Not looking at where they're going, not looking at the risk factors. And Commissioner Cini pointed it out, if you do not provide them the services they need for them to succeed, the gangs are going to become the surrogate families for these kids. And that's in essence what we're seeing. There's only a small fraction of these kids that are ending up in gangs. They are a large percentage of gang arrests at this point based on the population as a total. But I think it's really a humanitarian program, and I think that's where we have to focus on it. It has to be focused on resources. Resources can't be, very shallow in the amount of resources being provided. I think we have to really ensure that those kids are being, taken care of and tracked after the fact. You're dropping them in homes, you're dropping them in communities that aren't familiar. They are, they can assimilate into mainstream society, or they can assimilate into, an MS-13 or another gang.
Okay. Mike, you want anything?
Yes, Congressman. We've found from our investigations in dealing with the UACs, and the difficulty relies in at the border when they come across. The Constitution of El Salvador doesn't allow for the criminal record or exposure of gang activity of these particular persons. So the only way to be screened at the border would be look for particular tattoos or maybe an interrogation, an interview type of thing. But what happens when they get to the school districts, get put in a very bad position. A couple hundred could show up in any month of the year, and they have to go into an ESL school where they, with all these people in one class, where normally the high school would rotate classes amongst the different teachers. Mostly you have an ESL teacher with the same students in the same class most of the day. So if there is an infiltration of a particular gang member, they have the whole day to pressure these students. And we have found to happen is that they originally are victims. They're not in the gang, they're victims of crime from MS-13 or other gangs. And then over time, these gangs members have a very easy sell. They pitch protection and defense, and they succumb into the pressure over time.
Sheriff DeMarco?
Yeah, I want to echo what Commissioner Crunter said about the foster care program. My staff and I were discussing this the other day about really the need. If you're going to have a program, a humanitarian program, which is a compassionate program like this, you need caseworkers. These kids have to be assigned caseworkers, or else the program is not going to succeed.
Mr. Melendez?
Yes, I'd like to add, as part of my testimony, I indicated that 5,000 unaccompanied alien children from the Northern Triangle countries, which are specifically those countries that are strong in MS-13 presence, have been resettled in Long Island from 2014 till probably June or April 2017. Now, what I want to reiterate is, like all of our panel members have indicated, not all of these unaccompanied alien children will eventually become gang members. But the fact of the matter is that as of today, of those individuals, MS-13 members that we have arrested, 30% of them, and it's a continual number that we see, are unaccompanied alien children or arrived into the United States under the Unaccompanied Alien Children Program. So we talk about what's going on in the resettlement process or how they're located in the communities throughout the United States. One of the other things that's very disturbing is the fact that although these unaccompanied alien children may be resettled in a certain location, and as an example, may be resettled in Long Island, not necessarily are they in Long Island. So we've seen in some of these arrests where individuals were not resettled in Long Island, but were in Long Island, and they came in through the Unaccompanied Alien Children Program. The other thing that's very important is the fact that even if they self-admit at the border as MS-13 members, we still have to transfer them to the custody of HHS within 72 hours. And this is something that I submit to both of you, is that the Immigration and Naturalization Act, the INA, does not specify gang affiliation as a grounds of removal. That is, as a grounds of inadmissibility or to later remove from the United States. So the fact that they are verified gang members, that alone is not sufficient for us to remove them to the United States. And what's even more disturbing, they can come in and self-admit and say, yeah, I'm a MS-13 member from El Salvador, and I'm coming into the United States, and we cannot turn them around. So I submit that for your consideration, that the INA should actually include as a grounds of removal gang affiliation, and it would make our work a lot more efficient in managing the flow of these unaccompanied alien children through our borders.
Mr. Sweeney?
Sir, I actually wasn't too familiar with this program or familiar at all before I arrived here the
Is the
second
microphone
time.
on there?
So, as far as I know,
It's
it's on.
okay, okay.
Yep. So I wasn't familiar with this program prior to assuming this position. I agree with everything I've heard from everybody up here. To me, it's stunning that there's no notification to local authorities that you have a wave of incoming youth and there's no support network. It's, in my mind, a recipe for disaster. And if that part alone can get fixed first, I think that would give a huge advantage, especially to the school districts who can at least try to plan in advance what's coming their way. But I would agree with everything I've heard up here.
Thank you. Ms. Rice, for as much time as you want.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I think that you're not going to get any disagreement from my colleague, Chairman King, and I, that this situation is, to me, Exhibit A of the incredible failure of the federal government to do their part to help local communities where these children are coming. And I thank Commissioner Cini for being the first one to say the obvious, which is we have these kids here because a lot of them are fleeing similar violent situations where they came from, and they're thinking life is going to be better for them here, and the system fails them the second they touch American soil. Sergeant Marino, you mentioned, and I know that today is the focus is MS-13, but can you just talk a little bit more about some of the other gangs that you mentioned, and what level, if any, of cooperation is there between MS-13 and the other gangs that you investigate, or are they all rivals? And maybe just go into that a little bit.
Yes, MS-13 is almost always rivals with everyone. There is some times where the Serenos 13 have been associated with them, but that's rare in Nassau County, but it does occur. 18th Street is their #1 rival, both in Nassau County and across the country. We recovered a firearm used in a homicide that we thought would come back to the homicide in Nassau County, but it came back to a homicide in Houston, Texas, and the Houston PD was up here meeting with us, and when we laid out our photographs of our 18th Street gang members, there were about 12 that matched up to their photos of the ones they have, and Houston PD told us that they focused on MS for so many years, they lost track of 18th Street, and now 18th Street is rising in Houston. So we have to be aware of 18th Street. They are the #1 rival. We have a gang called Salvadorians with Pride, which started solely in Hempstead to defend themselves against. They are all American-born U.S. citizens, speak fluent English, and we did a similar program with the conspiracy. The first test case for the conspiracy with the district attorney's office was back in December on the SWP gang. So we took out one of the main rivals, and that gang, I don't think to this day has been really identified outside of Nassau County area. Besides that, you have the Latin Pride, the LPs, Novatos Locos, all that reside within, and the Bloods are historic enemies of MS-13, and that's basically MS-13 fights with every single gang almost. And 18th Street and SWP does show an alliance at times, and they switch back and forth between those particular gangs, and there are some members that have been in both or switched out of those particular gangs.
So is it MS-13 that is primarily populated by illegal people who are here in an undocumented status, or the other gangs that you're mentioning?
Well, MS, and just as an example, on the 41 indictment conspiracy, 19 were UACs, the rest were undocumented, and one was a U.S. citizen, a Dominican who came here when he was a child. So that's most of the MS is here in some sort of undocumented status. Some of the other gangs can be a mixture of that. 18th Street many times is also here with undocumented status.
Let me ask you, how many school districts in Nassau participate in the SAGA program? I put that question to you, Sergeant Marino, and to you, Commissioner Cini.
Well, generally, the ones that have had the majority of the gang issues always participate. We get some that don't have that participate. Some do not want to participate. They feel it's a negative aspect, but many of them participate in the SAGA, especially in the school zones where these particular gangs exist.
So let me just stop you there. So there are some schools that don't want to participate because they're afraid it's going to make their school look bad?
I don't think they're afraid it's to make the school bad. They might get the perception that they have a gang problem there.
But what if they do?
It's a difficult position for us.
So we need to get the school system obviously buying into this.
For the most part, they are.
I mean, if they think that people don't know that there's a gang problem in their local school, then they have their head in the sand. Thank you. Commissioner?
Sure. Prevention and intervention is one of the main focuses of the Suffolk County Police Department, as it is with the Sheriff's Office. In Suffolk County, we have several different gang prevention programs that work with our schools. We have the Change program, which is in North Bellport, Wyandanch, and is being introduced right now in Brentwood. That is an early intervention program where the organization, it's a not-for-profit called Strong, which is a gang prevention program. I think you're probably familiar with it since it started in Nassau County. They identify children who are at risk and case manage those children. And there's a big focus on family involvement, because obviously schools only have the children for a certain period of time. They're going home. We have to make sure that we're empowering the families to do right by these children. We also have our school resource officers in each one of our districts. They push in gang prevention programs into the classroom. They also, and there's been a major focus on this of late, they identify at-risk children, and we conduct what's called youth conflict insertions, or basically interventions, where we identify at-risk children and try to essentially case manage them, connect them to resources they may need, and try to get them on the right path. And communications with the schools is critical. Oftentimes we have information about their students that they don't know, and oftentimes they have information about students that we should be focused on that we don't know. So it is a touchy subject. This is working with schools is sensitive. There are privacy issues, and there are other issues at play. But we understand that the collaboration with the schools is critical.
I couldn't agree with you more. Commissioner, I have spent some time, obviously we have immigrant communities in my district, and what I hear very often is desperation on the part of people living in immigrant communities, some documented, some not. And they talk about how young girls are being kidnapped by gang members, and they are afraid to come forward because they're afraid that they are going to kind of be brought into the system and sent to a place that they don't call home anymore. And, the young boys who are joining the gangs, as we've all been talking about, because of whether it's a cultural affiliation or a sense of community or a sense of belonging, how does your police department, and by the way, I have to say you deserve credit for taking over an agency that was in serious turmoil. And from all accounts, I think Chairman King would agree that you're doing what needs to be done there. And I'd like to go into actually how you're improving the morale in the police department, but also training, because there are some reputational issues about how the police department in Suffolk treats people in immigrant communities, understanding that they have a job to do, but what programs you've put in place to allow for a more comprehensive approach to these issues. So how do you address, what do the police do when a young girl who is in an undocumented status comes and says that this is what just happened to me?
Right, so our policies are very clear on this. Our officers are prohibited from inquiring into the immigration status of those individuals who contact the police department as witnesses or victims or someone merely seeking police assistance.
Now, is that a new policy under your administration?
No, that policy existed prior to me becoming
Okay.
police commissioner. And the policy also talks about why that is the case. We want to create an environment that encourages people to come forward. And by the way, I just spent a week down at the FBI. There's literally, I haven't found a police commissioner or police chief who disagrees with that policy. This is not a real debate. Law enforcement officials recognize that we need to create an environment in which people feel comfortable coming forward. Simultaneously, we collaborate closely with the Department of Homeland Security. When we arrest individuals who are not here legally, we notify the Department of Homeland Security of that arrest. It's important that we have the right policies, which we do. There's no question about that. But the more difficult part, which I think is what you're touching upon, is messaging and communicating those policies to the people who need to hear them. And we do a tremendous amount of work in attempting to do that. We do direct community outreach to folks. We do it through churches. We do it through community organizations. We do it through schools. We do it through a host of different media. And we also use community ambassadors. And we try to break those barriers, develop relationships with folks in the community who are respected, particularly those people who are respected by the undocumented community, and we have them convey our policies to their constituents. because they're much more likely to believe it when it's coming from such a trusted community ambassador than law enforcement. And I say that, it's not a criticism of law enforcement. We have to understand the reality here. Many of these individuals are recently immigrating from countries where law enforcement is extremely corrupt, and there is virtually no trust between law enforcement and the citizens. So oftentimes, we're pushing back on a cultural mistrust that is extremely difficult. So we utilize community ambassadors to help us do that.
In your opinion, set up a structure that you think will work in terms of making the whole placement program for UACs better.
Right. So I think funding and notification and sponsor compliance are the key ingredients to making this program more responsible. I agree with, I believe it was Sheriff DeMarco who initially stated, all these children need to be case managed. So right now, the Office of Refugee Resettlement places these children in our communities, and they do a post-placement checkup and endeavor to close out the case file within 30 days. Oftentimes, that post-placement check is via the phone. That's woefully inadequate. Mm-hmm. And to the extent that they're funding post-placement services, the only contract that I've identified, and there could be others that I don't know about, but the only contract that I have identified is with Catholic Charities, and it's only good for 3 months post-placement, woefully inadequate. So what I would like to see is notification to appropriate authorities within the local municipality, the county government, the local police department, school districts, and a case management system set up that is funded appropriately, that involves an array of services, from psychological services to social work services to legal services. That way, we provide a system of support for these children who oftentimes are very vulnerable to gang recruitment.
And this is to whomever would like to answer this question. I think one of the things we haven't even mentioned, well, I think Sergeant Marino talked about a gun that was recovered that they thought they were going to connect to something else. But clearly, one of the reasons why these gangs are so violent is because they have access to weapons. What initiatives on the local level, partnering with your federal, state authorities, what are you doing to address the clear ease with which these gang members are able to get guns? And where are they coming from?
Sure.
How are they buying them?
Yeah, so I'll speak for Suffolk County. We have strong partnerships with the New York State Attorney General, with ATF, FBI, all of our federal partners, and obviously guns aren't manufactured in Suffolk County. I don't think there's many guns manufactured in New York State at all. And many of our guns come from the Iron Pipeline from the south. There are some exceptions. We do have some hot spots in the Northeast, point of origin. But the key, of course, is tracking these weapons, making sure we're doing ATF traces on all our weapons, sharing that intelligence with law enforcement agencies in the region, investing in technology in our lab to make sure that we're able to do ballistic analysis in a timely fashion, so that if there is a match, we know about it in almost real time. We're making improvements on that front. It's about intelligence. It's about making sure we're sharing that intelligence. And in terms of removing weapons from our streets, we've had a particular focus on search warrants. Since my administration came in, we've increased our search warrants in 2016 compared to 2015 by 118%. And in 2016, that helped us recover more illegal firearms than ever before in Suffolk County, 507 compared to 333 the year before. And that corresponds to a decrease in violent crime. So it's not because there are more shootings. In fact, shootings dropped 4.4%. It's because we're doing more enforcement.
And let me just say, I shouldn't say that this kind of gun violence is just specific to MS-13. We see it every day in the paper all across this country, and it's a much larger issue that we don't need to get into now. But just in terms of how you're dealing with MS-13, if anyone else has any thoughts about the issue of guns.
I'd also like to underscore that the fact that MS-13 members' weapons of choice are readily available at a sports store. So we're talking about, when we look at the level of violence that they carry out with baseball bats or other instruments that are found at a hardware store as a machete, and that actually makes it more challenging to be able to address the level of violence. I agree with what Commissioner Sini indicated. However, it's important to underscore when we're talking about specifically MS-13, the level of violence that they carry out and what's their trademark is the utilization of instruments that are found readily available to any member or any citizen at a hardware store or at a sporting goods store.
So you're saying they don't use guns?
No, they do utilize guns, ma'am.
Right,
but-
so there's very little you can do to prevent someone from going into a Dick's Sporting Good and buying a baseball bat. Right?
That's correct. But what I wanted to underscore is the fact that when you look at the level of violence that they carry out, they really, their seal is the utilization of machetes, the utilization of baseball bats. They do, yes ma'am, utilize firearms. However, it's important to underscore that because one of the things in my experience in dealing with gang operations in other jurisdictions, not necessarily with MS-13s, is that, or MS-13, are that the fact that gang members carry firearms or they have firearms readily available. Dealing with the MS-13 phenomenon is something that we could encounter, but not necessarily it's always the fact. So it makes it more challenging to be able to bring, if you find an illegal alien with a firearm, well, that's a federal charge that you can charge them with them. The fact of the matter that you find them with a bat, then of course it makes it more challenging for us, and it's very particular to the MS-13. I just wanted to underscore that.
No, I appreciate that. Can I just go to Mr. Sweeney? Commissioner Sini pointed out that one of the things that might help this situation is hiring more AUSAs, and having been a former one like the commissioner, I wholeheartedly agree that you can always use more. Prosecutors tend to be very overworked, not just at the federal level, but at the local level as well. What are your thoughts about that?
So I would let this district speak for itself. I know more is always good. More is more. More gets more cases, more prosecutions. So I think I agree with the sentiment, although I wouldn't be the one to argue that directly. But I think anybody in this building that works upstairs would.
And what about
agree.
agents?
More is more. We are a big office, so the New York office is the largest, as you know. We have the ability to surge resources where we need to, but more is more. The more we hire, the more cases we work, the more we get done.
Well, I couldn't agree more. Sergeant Marino, just in terms of the gun issue, are they still doing gun buybacks in Nassau County?
Yeah, I'll let the commissioner answer that.
Yes, we are. We are still doing gun buybacks with the Nassau County District Attorney, a program that was started a number of years ago.
And by the way, I don't say that just because I started them in Nassau County. I say that because you have to use every tool in your toolbox to figure out how to get guns off the street. And we had enormous success with that program. And they weren't all just old, inoperable weapons, right? So
No, they, it's as the Congressman King and Congresswoman Rice are aware, it is they're real guns that are taken off the street that could be diverted, even if they're legally possessed, they could be diverted into the hands of criminals. The one thing I'll also add on is with MS-13. MS-13 is unique. We've had great success in Nassau County reducing the number of shots fired, especially in that corridor, Roosevelt, Uniondale, Hempstead. But with MS-13, the weapon of choice, as was pointed out in Nassau County, is machetes and other knives, chains, bats. And after discussions with Sergeant Marino, it's in the last place with MS-13 are those firearms. When it comes to other gangs, we know that they have a propensity for gun violence. Because of the programs we've implemented, we have seen a reduction of those types of shootings in Nassau County. In Roosevelt, Uniondale in particular, we have from a peak in 2007 of 350 or so shootings. We have now somewhere in the neighborhood of about 40 that we've been able to sustain for an 85% reduction in shots being fired in those two communities.
Commissioner Cini, what is the status of the fusion centers that you mentioned before?
I'll let FBI speak regarding, I'll let the two federal agencies speak as to their fusion centers. We have one in Suffolk County that's not MS-13 specific. It's an intel center that's obviously very focused on gangs. The one in that's abroad, our trip is being scheduled currently for the month of August. There will be several local law enforcement officials as well as federal officials invited to attend, to engage in roundtable discussions regarding what that fusion center should look like so that it can be most effective.
So for the FBI, the Fusion Center, or the Fusion Cell that I mentioned earlier, is a group of analysts that sit inside our Long Island Gang Task Force. So those analysts are from almost all the agencies, as we continue to build, that are already represented by operators on that task force. Those analysts are solely grabbing the intel that moves from those departments and sharing that amongst themselves. The other network that we have that we are working to exploit even further is the Domestic National Intelligence Framework. So there's 12 DNI reps around the country. In this region, we have tried to take some of our offices in the Northeast to focus not just on the national intelligence priorities, counterterrorism, counterintelligence, but what are we doing, what are we seeing in criminal areas that actually, in my opinion, affect some of our national security concerns. So as an example, last week we had all the offices on the East Coast from, in my region at least, from Philly through Albany, discuss MS-13. So we could try to bring some of the state and local partners in from those different jurisdictions so they can see what we have, we can see what they have, and then partner them up. I think Tim was down recently in PG County as Mike McGarity, who's my SAC for criminal, tried to work that network. So it's a network, and each one of those field offices has analysts, has an intel branch or a field intelligence group that can then leverage that network up and down or around the region.
For Homeland Security, specifically for HSI, here in Long Island, actually in this building, we have a command center in support of Operation Matador, where we house all elements from the Department of Homeland Security, Customs and Border Protection, the U.S. CIS as well, the Fraud and Detection National Security Officers are assigned, as well as HSI and ICE intelligence agents. One of the other things that we utilize, and that's specifically for Long Island operations, in our headquarters, we have a database that we actually bounce financial information off of. So any type of financial information, we have a repository of information that allows us to create these link charts and structures of the MS-13. The other thing is at the national level is, of course, we utilize the Special Operations Division systems that is actually directed from the Drug Enforcement Administration. So any gang-related information regarding telephone numbers or targets, we are able to place it in that repository so it's accessible to all partner agencies as well.
Great. Thank you all very much.
Commissioner Cini, in the last several months, we've had the administration in Washington, we've had Governor Cuomo in Albany, we've had yourself, obviously FBI and Homeland Security, in effect declaring war on MS-13. There's been a number of high-profile arrests, large numbers of arrests surging. Have you found an increase in cooperation from the community? What impact has that had? Are they coming forward with more intelligence? I remember being with you 2 months ago in Central Islip, I guess it was, when you, in effect, challenged people to come forward or asked them to come forward. Have you seen any increase in people volunteering information?
Yes, the community has been tremendous. I know oftentimes the media wants to portray this picture of a community that's not willing to come forward, but it simply doesn't jive with reality. I understand that people are fearful. They're fearful of the gang, and those who are undocumented are also fearful of immigration consequences. But I think because of the brutal nature of MS-13, the support that the Suffolk County Police Department has provided to individuals, and the work that many of the advocacy groups and community-based organizations have done in the community, we've received significant assistance from the community. That's not to say we could not benefit from more. It's hard to know what we don't know in that sense. But we have a lot of different options for people to come forward. They can come forward through third-party advocates. And some of those individuals, hardworking individuals, are in this room behind me. They can call our anonymous tip line, 1-800-220-TIPS, and that accommodates over 200 foreign languages. They can essentially reach out to any asset that they have in the police department. We believe that the community, as the police department, feels that it's important to stand strong, and we've been very pleased with the support that we have received from the community. And part of that, too, is the victims' families. I cannot say enough how tremendously supportive the victims' families have been. And think about the trauma and tragedy that they've recently experienced. Oftentimes, people may react with anger and look to blame. And the family members have been tremendously supportive, even becoming activists in their own communities to empower the residents to fight against this gang. And I can't say enough about that. It's remarkable.
Congressman Rice was asking Sergeant Marino about the number of schools who participate. I'd like to also ask that about Suffolk County. And this does not involve copay, but I know that some of the victims' families have said in other school districts that when they went to the school district and told of threats, actual threats made against their children, that the school district did not follow through in informing the police. How does that work as far as when they should come to you, when they shouldn't? How does privacy work? Because I know some of these victims' families are very upset by that. Now, how accurate it is, I'm not vouching for it, other than they seem very believable to me when they told me.
All right, without commenting on any specific instance, I will say very clearly, whenever there is an allegation, even if it's not corroborated or confirmed, whenever there's an allegation of some sort of threat that's associated with a gang, that information should be immediately shared with the Suffolk County Police Department. It's that simple.
Okay. On the question of the unaccompanied minors, I know I've spoken with Secretary Price's office, because HHS, basically Health and Human Services, seems to have the final word on that. Has there been any improvement in their relationship in dealing with HSI on that?
As a matter of fact, yes, there are. So we're basically, when I talk about the 5,000 unaccompanied alien children that were resettled here in Long Island, it's based on the information that HHS has readily provided to us. So their willingness to cooperate with law enforcement and work with us, we've seen a dramatic change, and they are cooperating and providing information.
Mr. Senior, Mr. Crump, have you seen any of that as far as more cooperation from HHS?
I think it's important that we have ready access to information that's in the possession of the Department of Homeland Security and the Office of Refugee Resettlement regarding immigration status and other facts that may help us use certain tools. The Department of Homeland Security, under the Special Agent in Charge's leadership, has recently provided a mechanism by which the police department can request information and receive it within a short period of time, certainly within 24 hours. And that, I think, is going to do a lot of good for information sharing and for the overall mission. In terms of determining the UAC status of certain individuals, I still think there's room for improvement. I still have holes in my data, and I'm a very data-rich institution. Nassau County PD and Suffolk County PD have intelligence-led policing models. We're collecting data on a daily basis. We have a tremendous amount of intelligence, and yet I have holes in that data, and that needs to be addressed. In particular regarding the status of certain individuals as it relates to the UAC program.
Mr. Crump, Sergeant Marino.
It's what we've seen is significant improvement in communication with Homeland Security, who for us is acting as the gate with Health and Human Services. But as far as direct contact with Health and Human Services, we haven't seen any improvements in that area. And as you're aware, Congressman King, is our entire organization is driven by the intelligence-led policing model. The Intel Center is very robust. But we do know that there are holes, as Commissioner Sini pointed out, when it comes to the unaccompanied minors. And I don't know that it's so important for us to be getting the information on the unaccompanied minors. I think it's more important that social services in Nassau County are getting that information so they can get them into the necessary programs. It's all about intervention, and it's all about prevention, right? So if they start committing crimes, we're going to arrest them. But it's getting them the resources on the front end that's the most important part of this.
Sheriff DeMarco? Okay.
By the time I get them, they're usually in custody
Right.
and in the facility, and we have a very close relationship with Department of Homeland Security. There are 3 agents stationed at the facility. They work very closely with our gang intelligence unit, doing interviews and determining status and whether or not they're removable.
Okay. You know, when Attorney General Sessions here, we did raise up the issue of the assistant U.S. attorneys. Has anybody heard anything on that?
In terms of,
More U.S. attorneys?
no, I have not. I'm quite sure there's been no increase. And just to sort of piggyback on the Assistant Director's comments, I consulted with the U.S. Attorney's Office a couple weeks ago regarding their staffing levels. And if you look at their staffing levels and as it correlates with the population in Suffolk and Nassau County, they have less staffing than other offices with more population. So I think there's a real argument to be made using data, using staffing levels, population, index crimes to make that additional AUSAs are warranted.
But, Mr. Chairman, if I may just
Sure.
ask a question. Does the hiring freeze apply to DOJ?
I don't believe so, no. Because I know Attorney General did say he was going to certainly look into it. He seemed receptive. I'm just wondering if anything has come through the pipeline, any word come down. Okay, we can check on that with the acting U.S. Attorney.
So just to throw out some stats,
I think you compared it to Nebraska or something.
yeah, Kansas, same thing.
So you can say that. I do that and I get in fights with guys in my party. But anyway.
Yeah, so Nassau and Suffolk combined has a population of about 2.85 million with 14 AUSAs, 3 of whom I believe are supervisors. And by comparison, Kansas has a population of 2.9 million and 24 criminal AUSAs, plus 6 special assistants. The Eastern District of Tennessee has a population of 2.6 million and over 30 AUSAs. And I believe there are other examples that can be provided.
Yeah. Mr. Sweeney, you seem like you wanted to say something.
No, I'm good, sir.
Tim, I know you and Kathleen, you prosecutors always stick together. So I know. No, but I actually fully endorse that.
I think it's
Yeah.
quite clear.
Right.
More agents, more prosecutors, more cases. It's more focus on the gangs. It's more focus on the heroin epidemic that is ravaging Long Island. You're looking at literally close to 1 person a day dying as a result of a heroin overdose on Long Island. And every single police officer on Long Island is trained on Narcan, so there's literally hundreds more, 2 or 3 a day, that are would have overdosed if not for the intervention of the police.
Ms. Rice, you think?
No, good.
Okay. Okay, listen, I want to thank all of you. Anything else we should be asking? Nothing? Okay, thank you. Thank you all for your testimony, and really, more important than that, thank you for the job you're doing day in and day out. I want to really commend you for it. This is a war. We're going to win it. It's going to be because of people like you. So thank you very much, and to all the men and women that work for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to drink that water, but I'm afraid
The committee will be in recess for 5 minutes.
thank you so much.
Catherine, you might cover.
What do you pay a year in tolls?
A month I pay $300.
Yes, the thing out of the year. It's pretty
I think
bad.
about it all the time, trust me.
Things going for you. That's a new job. I love it. Yeah. It's awesome.
Busy.
I have to talk to your boss. What? Let's go. I want to. You never know which camera's on.
Good old days. You know now, right? You've been to Brightwood many times now and said, boys, it's good to see you.
Thank you. I'm fine.
What a world you've been better for me too.
Yeah.
First. I hope I'm not first. You guys ever need anything from us? Is anything? I run the youth program too.
Give people's attention. Thank you. The committee will come to order. And again, I want to thank our witnesses in the first panel today. I think it was very, very informative. Our second panel today consists of Mrs. Evelyn Rodriguez, Mr. Roger Mickens, who are the mother and father of victims, Kayla Cuevas and Nisa Mickens. Also, we have Dr. Howard Koenig, who is the superintendent of the Central Islip School District, and Mr. Patrick Young, who he and I have had engagements over the years, all professional. I've recognized them both from friendly meetings we've had and from protesting against me. But in any event, it's great to have you here today. Let me start on a very serious note. Mr. Evelyn Rodriguez and Mr. Robert Mickens. Mrs. Rodriguez is the mother of Kayla Cuevas. Mr. Mickens is the father of Nisa Mickens. Their daughters were killed on September 13th, 2016 by MS-13 gang members. In the face of unspeakable tragedy, they have both been advocates for justice for their daughters, improved security in schools and public safety. As Commissioner Cini said, I think they've formed invaluable work by coming forward the way they have, by really giving a public face to private anguish. And also, I would say that I know I've had several meetings with them. I know they met with Attorney General Sessions. They meet with Commissioner Cini on a regular basis, and with the FBI, HSI, everyone involved. So I want to thank them for all they've done up till now, again, in the face of unspeakable horror. And I want to thank them for agreeing to testify here today. So I now recognize Ms. Rodriguez and Mr. Mickens, and you have the time you want. You can speak in the order in which you wish. Thank you.
You want to go first?
Yeah. Ever since September 13th, 2016, the loss of Nisa and Kayla has shocked us, not only as a family, shocked our community, and shocked the world. 2 young ladies' lives have been cut short over something that could have been settled differently, could have been handled differently, it could have been acted upon in a different way. We sit here and think about it every day about what would have happened if these girls didn't leave the house. Would it have made a difference? Yes, and possibly no. Because the way these criminals think, we all really not too sure how they actually think. They could have mental problems, or they could just be, very ignorant about how they go about handling things in life. But it's very difficult, but we have a lot of support from our community. We support each other, and we also just, take the time every day to give our praises and say thank you, for allowing us to have the strength to carry on to make sure this doesn't happen to another student or somebody else's child or their father, brother, sister, aunt, and uncle in our community. And, we'd like to say thank you to the Suffolk County Police, Homeland Security, FBI, because they are providing security for our community and, of course, the rest of Long Island and the United States. And it shows the community that security is there. They're trying to make it better. It's actually working. Now, us as becoming advocates and activists in our community, we have to show that, yes, you have to work with your local police in order to get results done. It's very important for us community leaders, people who just average citizens in the community, step forward to say something. It's not about, the old term snitching. You have to say something. And by us sitting here today, hopefully it will help bring more of a change to our community and to the rest of the United States.
Mrs. Rodriguez?
Thank you, Congressman King and Congresswoman Rice, for having me here today to testify on behalf on this critical mission to eradicate MS-13. My daughter, Kayla, was bullied, targeted for 2 years in school from the MS-13. She was murdered September 13th, found September 14th. 24 hours later, they found her. These individuals have changed my life, my family's life, dramatically. We are a family that used to go out on the weekends, take the kids to the park, go to church, be with other family, with friends, with their kids. You don't see that anymore. You see people staying home now, holding their kids tight. Kids are going to school afraid because they're being targeted and bullied, as my daughter was. Parents are scared to send their kids back to school. The majority of kids are being homeschooled because they're either being targeted or bullied, or the parents are just scared to send them to school. We need to have stronger policies, laws in place for these individuals that do this heinous crime to these other kids. They're kids killing kids. That needs to be stopped. We cannot let our kids be afraid to go to school, because in the beginning, this is where it all originates, in school. They get them in school. They target them. They bully them. They have other people to look out to get them. My daughter, for 2 years, her life was miserable in school. She had to wear a tougher skin every day to go to school. You can see the difference in her personality. The minute she walked on that school ground, her personality changed. She had to be a tough girl in order to survive that whole day in school. And when Mr. King was saying about law enforcement being contacted, some of these schools do not contact law enforcement when a child is being threatened. And I can testify to that, to 100% fact, that that does not happen. They like to keep it undercover, they like to keep it among themselves, and they want to say they are taking care of it, but they can't. This situation is growing every day. Every year, the numbers increase in school with these gang violence, and it needs to be stopped. I want to say thank you to everyone that's been affiliated, involved in trying to get these individuals. Commissioner Cini, law enforcement, 3rd Precinct, FBI, Gang Task Force, everybody that's involved, I want to say thank you for your hard work and your dedication. And please continue to be dedicated to ensure that these individuals are caught and justice will be done for them. They'll be judged. I'm sorry. We also need programs, interventions in schools. Fundings need to be supplied for the schools. Every time the fundings get cut, our kids are more in danger. Our kids are in risk to things to be happening in the district. Our state officials, federal officials, law enforcement has to come together and find a solution, something that can work out through our community to come together to make things right, a little better. I do see a difference in our community and people coming together, coming a little bit more out, giving more information, but a lot of them are scared due to their status. As Mr. Commissioner Cini said, that has nothing to do. If they have information, please provide it, because your status here, that's not in question. I believe the American dream for everybody. Everybody here works hard to have that dream. I just want these criminals that are coming into our country to be stopped, to be investigated further. They're coming in here, recruiting our kids, if not in the high rate of the risk of these unaccompanied kids coming into our country. It needs to be further investigated. It needs to be more policies in place in order to make our kids safe, our families safer, our community safer. I think that's it.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Dr. Koenig, Dr. Howard Koenig is the superintendent of schools for the Central Islip School District. He's had a long career in the education field. I've had the privilege of visiting his school district a number of times. And I have to say, it was actually in his school district, I guess going back 2 years ago now, that I began to learn the full extent of MS-13 penetration into the schools and the programs that you have adopted to try to combat that. So I want to thank you for agreeing to be here today. I know you've had to cancel some other meetings to be here. So I thank you, Dr. Koenig, for, again, being so attentive to this issue and for your dedication. You're recognized.
Thank you. Chairman King, Congresswoman Rice, I want to thank you for your invitation to appear and testify at this hearing. I am proud to serve as the superintendent of schools for the Central Islip Union Free School District, the school district we are all located in at this very minute. The very violent activities of MS-13 have had a great and terrible impact on our schools, on our community, and most importantly, on our students. The ability of criminal members of this gang to gain entry to the United States is something that goes far beyond what any school district or local community can resolve. However, since the gang's success is measured in its recruiting new and younger members from our schools, this is something that I believe we can have a positive impact on reducing and, God willing, preventing. It is that I would like to speak to you about today. The young school-aged candidates for gang recruitment are isolated, frightened, and feel very vulnerable. Their new country, their new community, their new schools can feel very, very unwelcoming. They have come in so many cases, as you have heard this morning already. They have come in so many cases from places of extreme violence and death. They have spent very little time, if any, in organized schooling. They do not speak the language of their new home. They are not familiar with the local customs or societal norms. They are missing and need so very much structure and support in their lives. They seek a feeling of belonging to their communities. It is our job in the schools to provide for the education of all of our resident students. We want to do that in a safe and secure environment. Our newly arrived students very often come with significant needs, and we provide services to those children based on those needs. We partner with local community agencies to help these students. Agencies here in Islip, such as Youth Enrichment Services, who we work very closely with in providing programs for these students. With the help of programs from New York State and the U.S. Department of Education, we had been able to provide help to our newly arrived students, not only during the school day, but in after-school programs and other things to help those students transition into their new communities. The present executive budget proposal would reduce funding by approximately $9.2 billion for the Education Department. The programs that we would lose and the help that we would not be able to provide to these students because of these cuts include, and this is not an inclusive list, but it includes after-school programming, extended day academic support, special education help, teacher development help, and the domino effect that the federal cuts to the New York State budget would impact our ability to provide other programs that we were able previously to offer. This is the second largest requested decrease in education aid since, I believe, 1983. That request in 1983 was met with a congressional increase in assistance to the Education Department and our schools, and I am confident that you guys will do that job again. I hope I'm confident. Now, why do I list these? It is because the loss of these programs will hamper our ability to bring newly arrived students into the mainstream of school life and to provide to them a sense of belonging. It is the absence of this connection between these students and the mainstream of school life that makes them easy prey for gang recruitment. It can be postulated, I think, that the reductions in the assistance that we receive to enable us to work with these students becomes a tool. These reductions would become a tool which enhances successful gang recruitment activities. I thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this morning, and thank you for the chance to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kenny. Thank you very much for your testimony. Our final witness is Mr. Patrick Young. He's the program director at the Central American Refugee Center in Hempstead. He's an immigration attorney at Immigration Rights Advocate. He's a special professor of immigration law at Hofstra University School of Law, and in 2012 he was named co-director of Hofstra's Immigration Law Clinic. As I said, Mr. Young and I have known each other over the years. I have great respect for him. We don't always agree, but I think it's always been on a professional basis, so I want to thank you for being here today. Thank you for your efforts, and I look forward to your testimony. You're recognized.
I thank you, Chairman King and Ranking Member Rice, for allowing me to testify today in front of this committee. You know, it's very moving to listen to Mr. Mickens and Mrs. Rodriguez's testimony, because certainly the harm they've suffered has been suffered by them and by a dozen other families in the area. And the fear that they talked about in the community is a fear that many people in the community feel. Nassau and Suffolk counties have 526,000 immigrants living in them out of a total of 2.8 million people. That means 1 in 6 Long Islanders is an immigrant. So, you know, we sometimes talk about immigrant communities, but immigrants are spread throughout Long Island, although certainly certain communities are concentrated in certain villages here. We have the largest suburban immigrant population in the United States, and the population of immigrants here is roughly equivalent to that in San Francisco, Philadelphia, and Boston. So although immigration is often thought of as an urban or rural phenomena, 50% of immigrants now move to suburban areas, and Long Island was one of the first suburbs to have a large number of immigrants. In the mid-1990s, when Mara Salvatrucha first came to my attention, Corazon approached the Nassau County Police Department to partner with the police in reaching out to immigrant communities to oppose the growth of MS-13. We arranged for meetings at our office for the police to get together with ordinary Central American immigrants to build relationships, because policing has to be based on relationships. I would say that prior to that time, the police had not really been focused on the immigrant community. As the police began to devote more resources to countering Mara Salvatrucha, they adopted a strategy of working side by side with the primary victims of these gangs, the young immigrants. Corazon was invited to help train several classes of police cadets at the academy and provide training to the detective and hostage negotiation units of the department. We even had 2 police officers intern with us in order to learn how to talk with the community and work with the community better. Nassau police understood that many in the growing immigrant community came from countries where the motto of the police was not serve and protect, but oppress and brutalize. The
Mr. Young, what year was that, just to put it in context? What years are we talking about?
This would be in the between, well, we first were working with Herb Faust and back around 1998.
Sorry to interrupt you, I just wanted to get that.
Sure, and then with a lot of our work expanded when Lawrence Mulvey became the police commissioner. So, you know, this is not a partisan thing. These are through 2 Republican administrations and 1 Democratic administration. Nassau police listened to immigrant concerns and made sure their department was accountable to the people that they served, irrespective of immigration status, and long before it became a mantra among police. As Commissioner Sinney said, the Nassau police early on adopted a creed that they would not ask your immigration status if you were a victim or a witness or even simply trying to seek the help of the police. The Nassau County District Attorney's Office, under both Kathleen Rice and Madeline Singas, has worked hard to ensure that immigrants from countries without functioning judiciaries understand that Nassau is not like their homelands, that criminals cannot act with impunity, and if they're harmed by criminals, they can obtain justice. In Suffolk, Corazon also regularly hosts meetings between our clients and members of the Suffolk Police. The difference with the situation in Nassau, however, is that these extremely positive interactions are of very, very recent vintage. As the Southern Poverty Law Center documented in 2009, the Suffolk Police Department did not include immigrant cooperation in their policing strategies. The report found that violence against Suffolk immigrants was being fueled by elected officials and some law enforcement officials. Latinos believe that their reports of crime to the police went uninvestigated and ignored. This failure to partner with immigrants resulted in many tragedies in Suffolk, one of which was the rise of MS-13. The elevation of Tim Sinney to police commissioner seems to have brought real change to the way the department does business. Spanish-speaking officers have been hired in record numbers, and the police meet regularly with community leaders. Unfortunately, these new initiatives are only a little over a year old. 3 years ago, a large number of unaccompanied children came to the United States. As was testified before, about 8,000 live here now. And we're often asked, why so many? Well, this is where their families live. They're not being released to people on the streets. They're not street children. These are children who are being released to their family members. Long Island has the 5th largest Central American community in the United States, and in most years we have between the 3rd and 5th largest of unaccompanied children coming here. Correcen works with more than 200 of these children. Many left because they or a family member was threatened or harmed by gangs trying to force them to join. These are the kids who said no to the gangs. You know, we always tell our children, say no to gangs. They said no, and then they often became targets of rape, kidnapping, or death threats. In doing so, in saying no, they were placed in mortal danger. When the children came to Long Island 4 years ago, they were met with hostility from some officials and with illegal exclusion from some schools. It took action by the State Attorney General to compel some districts to provide constitutionally mandated access to education. Correcen, which worked closely with the Attorney General's office, had dozens of children who were kept out of school September, October, November of 2014. Few of the refugee children received special orientations or welcomes to the community in which they had arrived. Some told us that they were very aware that they were viewed as a problem rather than as children by local officials. Federal, state, and county governments failed to make provisions for the reception of children. I know we have advocates who are dressed in white behind me, and many of them met with county leaders, with state leaders, and with federal leaders to ask that more resources be given to the districts so that they could work more closely with these students. I know that you and Congressman Israel also worked on that, but it's something that largely was not forthcoming, as you mentioned before. By contrast, almost as soon as a much smaller flow of children began in New York City, the city appropriated over $1 million to assist in their resettlement here. Similar welcoming programs should be implemented on Long Island. The children need to learn that if they're being bullied by gang members or in their neighborhoods or schools, they can turn to school officials and the police for help. One of the things I think that Commissioner Sinney mentioned that I think is very important is that while there may be a small number of unaccompanied children who are gang members prior to arriving here, in most of the situations where people have been tempted to join the gangs, it's been because they've been in schools and been harassed either by Mara Salvatrucha or by rival gangs, and either sought to end the harassment by joining the gang or have sought the protection of an alternative gang. The welcoming must also come from public officials. A small number of young immigrants do become involved in gangs, but stigmatizing all immigrant youth as potential gang members only convinces the young that they have no allies outside of their ethnic group. The violence of Mara Salvatrucha should be kept in perspective as well. Long Island still has one of the lowest homicide and violent crime rates among the country's metropolitan areas. As the immigrant portion of Long Island's population has grown over the last 40 years, the homicide rate has gone down, not up. To uncover the criminals behind the outrages committed by MS-13, we need the cooperation of the people that they victimize, the immigrant community. Immigrants will not be the eyes and ears of the police if they see the police as auxiliaries of ICE and assistants in deportation of otherwise law-abiding immigrants. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Commissioner Cini has left, but I know in my conversation with him, and I believe in public statements he's made, he doesn't think that it's just by coincidence that some of these children have ended up with certain families. but he has said that he thinks that MS-13 in Central America is coordinating some of these kids. Now, let's stipulate right at the start, the overwhelming majority of these kids are honest, law-abiding, not going to get into trouble. But the other part of it is that the majority in some cases, and at least 30% in others, of those charged with serious crimes are unaccompanied minors. And it's felt that the MS-13 in El Salvador actually knows which families some of these kids are going to be going to. They're told what to do when they cross the border. And then you find that people who volunteer into responses have either been threatened by MS-13 or have been paid by MS-13 or are actually supporters of MS-13. And so even if that's a small number of the overall number, what could be done to have better screening so that sponsors who are affiliated with MS-13 are not, to not have these kids placed with them? And can more be done to scrutinize, I know they're young kids, but the records of these kids coming in, are they coming from MS-13 families in El Salvador? And again, I'm stipulating up front, the great majority of them are innocent kids, and we're a welcoming country, so I'm not trying to stop the program, but what can we do to make the program more effective and more safe? And because even though we say that Suffolk County and Nassau County have low crime rates, if you're living in Central Islip or Brentwood, you're one of the highest murder rates in the world probably right now, or not the world, in the country. I mean, you're talking about 17 murders in basically 2 communities over the last year. Community's not that large, it's a large number. So my community has no murders. But if I was living 20 minutes away, I would be living in a high crime area, certainly for the last several years. So what can we do to protect the innocent immigrants, documented and undocumented, from the MS-13 scourge coming in through the unaccompanied minors?
Sure, I appreciate the question. I think that there's really 2 parts to the answer. I think that the first part is, as you rightly point out, even if we assume that all of the unaccompanied children who've been charged with crimes associated with MS, that still is 1% of all of the children. So it's a very small number. And I believe Commissioner Sinney also said that most of the MS folks that they've arrested appear to have joined MS after they came to the United States. So I think in addressing that, I think we're looking as both police commissioners and the head of the gang unit in Nassau County pointed out, I think you're looking at creative and aggressive anti-gang work in the schools and also in the communities, because the schools are an important place, but many of the kids, as has been pointed out, when they first arrive in the United States, which is when they're frankly the most vulnerable to recruitment, many of the children don't necessarily see the school as a place where they find refuge and safety. So these programs should also be extended into churches. As you know, when you've visited the community, many of the folks meet every week, essentially. The community comes together every week in the church.
I mean, not to interrupt you now, but again, I do know from talking to Commissioner Sinney that there are a number of kids who are placed by MS-13 operating out of El Salvador.
Yeah, and I think that's important to address as well. I think it's, my understanding is it's a very small portion of the children. It's a very small subset, as Cindy said, of the total. I think that one of the things that the federal government should be doing is to have greater engagement by ORR, which is the Office of Refugee Resettlement. ORR typically spends only a month working on each particular case.
I think in the last several months they're changing that. That's what I'm hearing.
They're changing it, and there are cases in which they maintain contact for more than 6 months. But I think that a more general involvement would not only identify those who might actually be affiliated with MS, but would also serve a useful purpose for other new arrivals who could be helped in integrating into their communities. Because I think as they integrate into their community, as they have a feeling of affiliation, for instance, with Central Islip schools, they're not going to be drawn into MS. It's the child who's alienated who's most likely to be drawn into it.
Okay, if I guess either Mrs. Rodriguez or Mr. Mickens, if they want to comment on that, whether or not you believe that there are families who are supportive of MS who are sponsors for the children?
Yes, I truly believe that. Because they come up here, to work, to find a better way of life. How much is that money being sent back to their country to bring them back up here? So I truly do believe, yes, there is some type of recruitment going on where they may send a child from, El Salvador to Texas to be with this specific family for X amount of time. Then they could also ship them to New York to be with another family that's already established within the organization. That's something that's very true. A lot of kids are also being led into it because as a young child, 13, 14, maybe even 10 years old, who's new to America, new to our customs, for them it's like us adults starting a new job. Where when we first start the job, we're not familiar with the policy and the procedures. We don't know this person, we don't know that person, until this one particular person comes up to you who starts showing you, oh, this is how you do this is how you do that. The next thing you know, they're being lured and manipulated into joining this organization. So I truly do believe it's from both sides. Yes, they are being automatically, as I would say, drafted into it, and they're also being lured into it.
Ms. Rodriguez?
I feel the same too. When these kids are coming into United States, like I said, it has to be really thought out. I think there is a lot of glitches in the system that needs to be fixed, that needs to be looked at again, maybe structured a little bit better. Some of them are affiliated and some of them are not. Some of them, they're leaving their country due to the circumstances there. They want to have a better life, which is understandable. But like I said, my focus is trying to make these kids safer, policies stricter, laws changed, more harsh.
Dr. Ken, if you want to comment on that, then I'll ask one question before I yield to Mr. Rice. If you want to comment on that.
Yeah,
and
I do.
also, in view of what Mrs. Rodriguez said before, we're not mentioning other school districts, but if a parent came to you and said they felt that their son or daughter was being threatened, what action would you take? Would you contact the police?
We would first investigate what the parents said, and it has happened, obviously. And if we felt that it was something that we could not handle in terms of mitigating the contact between these students, if it was rising above that, we most certainly would involve the police. We have a very, very strong relationship with the 3rd Precinct. Our school resource officer, I said to the commissioner, I believe she may walk on water, Officer Tracy Mathis is very much in contact with our students, with our staff. The students in the schools know her and trust her. If they feel something is going on, they will talk to her. In addition, it's so important it's the isolated child who is so subject to this recruitment. So we tried to make sure that not even only new arrivals, but any child in the school who is isolated out of the mainstream, that we reach out, staff and other students who are in various clubs, reach out to these students to let them know that they're not alone. And our social workers, our teachers that work in the high school with these students have a very good relationship, not only with the students, but with the ability for that student to come, close the door, and talk about things that are going on. So we try to be proactive immediately when we hear this stuff. And we will certainly never, ever try to sweep it under the rug because we don't want it to look bad. What looks bad if you don't take care of the child that's in trouble.
Ms. Rice?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to extend my condolences to both you, Mr. Mickens, and you, Mrs. Rodriguez. I can't even imagine the pain that you and your family have gone through. It must be intolerable. But my question to you, Mrs. Rodriguez, is since your Taylor's experience at school in terms of being bullied. I got the sense that you felt that the school was not being responsive to the situation that was occurring with Taylor. I don't know, if you could just talk a little bit about your interactions with the school since Taylor was murdered, and do you think that the school has learned anything, I'm sure on behalf of, as a result of your activism in this space, from what happened to your daughter?
Kayla was a beautiful girl, into sports heavily, loved basketball. She used to tell me, "Ma, if I didn't make it in playing in ball, I wanted to be in law enforcement." Law enforcement was for her since she was very young. I could be at a red light, a police officer could be pulling up at a red light, and she immediately would pull down her window and start asking questions at 7-Eleven. That's how much she was so interested. Kayla was bullied for 2 years. I fought for the school 2 years, going back and forth. She's being targeted, names, they used to threaten her. I used to, as a concerned parent, pick up the phone and call. They said, "We'll take care of it, Mrs. Rodriguez. Don't worry, we'll have this under control." For 2 years, I've been listening to the same story. We have it under control. My daughter was threatened on school grounds with a knife. She immediately came home and told me. I immediately called up the school. They said the individual is no longer in the school. Coming that September, that individual was back in school. Go up there, have my meeting. They used to tell me the individual's not there anymore. Meanwhile, the individual was in another school district getting home tutored in school with three school security guards. My daughter will text me, "Ma, the person's back in school again." So how many times as a parent, as a concerned parent, active parent in school, have to go through this? With one big meeting asking for the superintendent to attend these meetings, their response was, he's unable to attend the meeting. Not getting the root of the problem, not being there to listen to the child, not just to label them right away saying this is a kid with a behavioral issue. If you see a kid being good in school, sports, all of a sudden you start seeing some type of behavioral changes, parents go up, meet with the student, with the teachers to see what the problem is. My daughter's telling me a lot of things. I'm expressing my concerns to the school, and they did nothing. And they continue to do nothing for these other kids. If a kid is coming up to a principal, to a dean, to assistant principal and tell them I was threatened, why don't you take that serious? Why are you not listening to these kids when they're coming up to you? Because at the end result, when the kids get tired of coming up with the same, coming up to to say that I was being bullied, and they see that there's no action being taken, what are they going to do? They're going to stop reporting it. They're probably going to have a tougher skin, always trying to look side to side to see who's looking at them or who's targeting them, or may not even show up for school. They'll cut out for that day. There's a lot of things going on in the school district that they are not acknowledging it. They want to take care of themselves, and it's a bigger issue. For my daughter, it was a big issue. The school did nothing for my daughter. Absolutely nothing. My daughter went to school the first day of school, got suspended because she was being bullied, and my daughter was being told that she couldn't defend herself? That's wrong. Totally wrong, unacceptable. If a child comes up to you with a concern, a complaint, take it serious. Don't put it to the side. Don't say we're going to take care of it, and especially when you have it on video, that your child's being threatened. There is no time to do no investigation. That is for that phone call to be made to the law enforcement and let them handle it. Because if a kid comes up to me and said my life is being threatened, I'm going to take that child to the precinct and report it immediately. Let them do the investigation. Whatever findings come out of that, well, at least I can say, you know what, I did my job. I went to the precinct. I made the report. When my daughter was being threatened in the very beginning, before the changeover with the law enforcement, new people coming into the new chair, they didn't take my report as a parent. They looked at me like, okay, just tell your daughter don't go there. That was their response. Now I'm bringing my daughter to a precinct to let them show, this is the way you do things. And for an officer to come out and tell me that very sarcastically, like if I was a piece of garbage, I felt very offended. My daughter's like, you see, Ma, this is why we don't come up to them, because if they treat you like that, just imagine to us. And you're an adult. That's not right. We're trying to teach our kids to do the right thing, to report things when they see things happening. But if we're being knocked out from the beginning, how is our kids supposed to know what to do? Now, things have been changing, absolutely. Law enforcement's been more supportive to the community. They've been more out there trying to get the community, just to get to know the people in the community. When I first moved out here to Brentwood, the police officers had their zones. They knew families by their first names. They used to come out of the car, have a cup of coffee. I know that for sure because my mother used to make the Spanish coffee for them. And they used, that's how the community should be. Connected, united as one. When this situation was happening in the early 2000s until just recently, the community was a mess. And I'm sorry to say that because I've been here in Brentwood since 1978. And for me growing up here, graduating, and now having my kids and graduating, two different worlds. And I know it's a whole new generation. I know that. But the consistency and the relationship should always be there. I see a big difference with the law enforcement in coming out, like I said before, with the community and getting things open. When you're going up to the precinct, is no more of that sarcasm or that attitude feeling. You're coming up there, you're being greeted. Yes, how can I help you? Not just sitting behind and says, yes. Oh, I'm sorry, then your daughter shouldn't be playing around in that area. This is the response before when people used to make reports was happening. Now you see the difference that I see going to meetings, talking to the community, talking to families. They actually see the difference when they're going up to the precinct and making a report or just asking for information. Because like I said, there's a lot of families that are scared to come forward with information or just to give information because of their status. And me talking to them, I reassure them that that's not the case. If you have any type of information, there's a hot tip line. You can call. You don't have to give your information. Just give the information that they needed. Oh my God, so much. There's so much that needs to be done. So much programs that needs to be placed in schools. We just really need to, like I said, to come and sit down and really open the doors for these kids to have more of the programs, after school programs, so we can keep them safe. Not have these kids have in the high risk category that they might be lured into these gangs. We just need more support, more funding for our kids to make sure that they have places to go after school instead of being lured someplace else. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Young, just taking off on what Mrs. Rodriguez said about how, as a 40-year resident of Brentwood, almost 40-year resident of Brentwood, how different it was when she was growing up to now when she's raising her children. And you specifically talked about how you felt that there was a better relationship with law enforcement back then when you were growing up. What advice would you give law enforcement about how they can make it better and get back to a time like Mrs. Rodriguez talked about when she was growing up?
Well, I think we have to remember that there was an active attempt to divide the community from the police in Brentwood, Central Islip, and elsewhere in Suffolk County when County Executive Levy discussed deputizing the police as immigration agents. And also, honestly, what she said doesn't strike me as something that I haven't heard before, where people from these communities have reported crimes and been told that the crime wasn't even going to be recorded as a police report. You know, it's just as important. I live in Westbury. My aunt lived in Central Islip. I have to say, when I began looking at the Suffolk County Police Department 15 years ago, I was very surprised by how different it functioned in communities of color from the Nassau Police Department, that accurate record keeping didn't seem to be an important goal. I think some of the things that need to be done are being done. You know, right now, 1 in 5 new officers has to speak Spanish. And I think that's important because prior to 4 years ago, the department, when they would be investigating a crime, if somebody was an immigrant, would ask the immigrant to have their child translate for them. You know, and this may be a situation in which a person was a victim of domestic violence or in which a person was a victim of rape. The police department now uses both telephonic translation and keep statistics on it, because we were finding that when they first started using telephonic translation, it's only being used a few times a day, and they weren't encountering a few Spanish speakers per day. But now they're using telephonic translation. They're doing regular outreach to the community. We've had the police by 3 times, I think, in the last month and a half at our organization, just to get to know the community, which is exactly what Ms. Rodriguez was saying was so important in her youth. It's important that people get to know the police, not simply when they're being arrested, or not simply when they see somebody being arrested, but that they get to know the police on a regular basis, and also that the police get to know them. You know, many times the police in places like Brentwood and Central Islip come from other parts of Suffolk County and really have no familiarity with these communities outside of the situations in which the law has been broken. The police have to be pillars of the community, but that means they also have to be part of that community. They can only be that if they can communicate with people there, if people feel comfortable, you know, as Ms. Rodriguez has been reassuring them that their immigration status is not going to be questioned when they report crimes. In 2008, when Marcelo Lucero was murdered in Suffolk County, we found that the Suffolk police did ask victims of crimes what countries they were from. You know, that's the sort of thing that alienated these communities, and it's something that we hope doesn't recur. We know that since there's been an upswing in the number of ICE raids carried out nationwide, that there is increased fear in immigrant communities. I think it's been a mark of Commissioner Sinney's good grace that he's been able to get the cooperation of the community, because the chief of police in Houston last month said that reports of rape from Latinas in his city were down 40% over the last 4 months. And it wasn't because 40% fewer Latinas were being raped. It was because people are much more frightened now to work with the police. As I say, we have more than 500,000 immigrants on Long Island, so that's more than the total population of native-born and immigrants in Buffalo, Syracuse, and Rochester combined. We can't make inroads against Mara Salvatrucha if we don't work directly with the immigrant community.
What's your opinion on the placement program for UACs and how it could be better?
I think that there are checks in place at the border. People can be excluded from the United States if they pose a danger to the United States. We do know they're examined for gang markings, etc. I think that the best thing that can be done, though, when somebody is released onto Long Island is for increased engagement by ORR. I think that the office needs to as several of the police officials said, needs to stay in touch with the children. I know there has been discussion about revealing the names and locations of the children. ORR has been a little bit nervous about suggestions along those lines because they are afraid that children will be targeted. Not all people within law enforcement, maybe are as professional as some of the folks we had here today. I think it's important that ORR does work with local community service agencies, with school districts, et cetera, to set up programs for the children. New York City does not get the names of the children, and yet they have very good outreach to the kids because they actually have a person stationed in immigration court who can meet with the children, and if the child wants, take down their information and then work with the child in integrating into the community. But I think that that should not fall only on local communities. I think the federal government, through the Office of Refugee Resettlement, should have caseworkers working with each of the children and at least work with them for the first year that they're here in the United States. That'll also give them a good chance to determine if the family is in fact the family that it was presented as.
Thank you.
Thank all the witnesses. I thank all the witnesses for their testimony, and also, if you just add something on, I should have said this during the first panel. I know Mr. Sweeney and HSI are still here. Mr. Melendez is still here. I'm going to just submit a question in writing as to the rationale and the working together of having two task forces. If you just, answer that for me in writing, why there's two task forces, how they work together, and what the rationale for that is. I want to thank all of you, especially Ms. Rodriguez, Mr. Mickens, for being here today. It's been invaluable to us, and I hope it provides some measure of relief to you to know that there is focus on this. Dr. Kenning, I want to thank you for your efforts over the years. Mr. Young, I'm sure we'll be seeing each other in the future. And again, I want to thank you for your dedication.
Either inside or outside your office.
Okay, either way. We can wave to each other. Okay, but seriously, again, I want to thank the two of you especially, and all the family members who have done so much to really bring this to the public eye, and hopefully it's not going to happen to other kids what happened to yours. But thank you all, and I have to say this officially, pursuant to Committee Rule 7D, the hearing record will be held open for 10 days. Without objection, the subcommittee stands adjourned.
No.